Greetings, cultivators from around the world. Jordan River here, in the garden with you, but taking up no space. So today, for this episode, we have Brandon Rust. Brandon Rust is back. He's here to talk about a couple of recent Instagram posts, go figure, microbes, and so much more. It's a really good episode. Before we jump in with him, though, shout out to Beanstalk Agriculture. Go to beanstalkcrf.com. Beanstalk Controlled Release Fertilizer. Use code GROWCAST for 15% off. And I am loving the easy application of this beanstalk. I have one plant, no longer in living soil. It is in the beanstalk, and it is absolutely beautiful. Easy nutrient application. Takes care of your plant throughout the whole life cycle. Just add it when you transplant it into its initial pot for veg, and then again, supplement it when you up pot, and it'll carry you all the way till the end of flower. Check out beanstalkcrf.com, the future of fertilizer. Code GROWCAST for 15% off. All right, let's get into it with Brandon Rust. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the show. Hello, podcast listeners who are now listening to GROWCAST. I am your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today again. Before we get started, I urge you to share the show, spread GROWCAST around, tell a grower. It's how we grow. Subscribe so you catch every episode. Find us on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere. Everywhere, we are there. Today we've got good friend of the show, creator of Bokashi Earthworks, and I believe, co-founder of Black Label Organics, and so much more. We got Brandon Rust back. What's up, Brandon?
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me. I'm always happy to be here to talk to your listeners about organic cultivation practices, cannabis, and microbes, of course.
Oh, yeah, man. We absolutely love it. Your past few episodes have gotten great reviews. We love when you make time for us here. I know you got a lot of stuff going on. Before we jump into my questions, any updates on what's been going on? You just cruising along at the farm, kicking butt, everything's going smooth? What's been happening?
Oh, man, it's not always smooth. It's always busy. There's always something going on. But, I'm from cannabis. I've been growing for more than half my life now.
Damn.
But I haven't run huge businesses before. So there's a learning curve. So we're figuring things out as we go on that end, building out Black Label Organics. Every run gets better and better, and we're on course to really evolve into something special, I think. And Bokashi Earthworks, if your listeners aren't familiar, which is my organic biofertilizer company, also specializing in microbial inoculants and different consortiums of microbes. And we just put the website back up, but we're going to do a relaunch. The website is going to be redesigned, more interactive. It's going to have a Discord, a lot of access to PDF files and information. And then I just got a new location, physical location. So I will eventually have my own custom soil there that can be picked up for people who are home growers, gardeners, and I'll also be doing organic supply, so amendments and microbes there at the physical location.
Man, it sounds like everything is going well. BokashiEarthworks.com, back up and running, folks, and then a revamp coming. Did you have a code? I heard you were going to create no pressure here, but I heard you were going to create a GROWCAST code for our listeners. Very excited about that.
Yeah, so I'm going to use, the code will be GROWCAST, easy to remember, and pretty specific. So I can absolutely do that. We can put a discount code on my website for your listeners if they're interested in picking up any products like Microbe Plus. And also the releasing other products will be available. All of the amendments, single source amendments that I use that we're about to talk about today will actually be available, but it'll be a little while. I'll have to get labeling done, packaging, supplies, and all the whole shebang. So
nice, man. That's going to be really useful to growers, especially ones that have tuned in, trying to adopt this philosophy. All the single input talk you've said on the show is very interesting stuff. Let's start though in a different place. We're talking Bokashi here, Bokashi Earthworks. I would love for you to dig in to something that you touched on before, but I really want to know the specifics. When I talk to growers, no matter if they're home growers or cultivators on a large scale, there's a lot of commonalities that you kind of buck. One of them being the mycorrhiza, using the use of myco. And you said that you you don't even use myco and that you prefer trichoderma and bokashi as a combination. Whereas most people growing out there use like a myco, and then they're usually using like a bacterial blend of some kind, right? Instead of like a straight up trichoderma, they'll use like a mammoth pea or a king crab or a photo plus, something that's kind of blended. I would just like for you to dig into why you think it's superior and why you've come up with this combination of trichoderma and bokashi versus everything else.
Okay, so it's based off of both the anecdotal evidence that I've collected as far as visual, and then also off of data that I have seen, and then also off of scientific peer-reviewed white papers that I've gone over.
Oh, hit me. Let's go into all of it. So why? Yeah. Talk about that.
This is why. So it's contingent on the condition, right? Your growing condition. There's a really big disconnect when it comes to the way that people are trying to put sciences together for growing cannabis when it comes to, the organic soil food web side. Because specifically the soil food web is so much about building actual soil from an agronomic condition, as you would see in a field condition where you have dirt, and then what you're doing is you're adding organic matter to that. You're adding microbiology, worms, micro and macro fauna, macro and micro arthropods, and that's to build soil, right? And that's it, so that way you can build it into something that it wasn't before. And we can alter the physical structure and chemical properties of these soils. However, I'm not going to take that route unless I'm growing in an agronomic soil.
Sure.
Okay. So if I'm in a soil that I know is completely deficient of phosphorus, which I do, we have outdoor at Black Label, we have tilled organic amendments in, compost, gypsum, and the things that we needed. And it's part of the process to build and change the chemical structure of that. But that is in an agronomic field setting. Typically, most of the cannabis cultivators who are growing organically are growing in what's called a modified growing mix soil, and it's considered maybe like living soil. But in actuality, there's nothing, by definition, it's not soil.
Right.
Because soil is something that has been weathered from sand, silt, and clay, and they contain those types of chemical properties and those elements in the soil. What we've done is we've taken Mother Nature, the things that are in Mother Nature, and we've combined them in a way that they function optimally to feed plants, right? And so we have to take a slightly different approach, at least in my opinion.
Wow.
Having a wide biodiverse microbial population in an agronomic setting can be beneficial because typically you're going to be deficient across the board in your nutrient profile. Here's an example. The field conditions that I tested, even after we amended, we were still highly deficient in nitrogen, highly deficient in potassium, highly deficient in copper, mildly deficient in calcium. But we had a massive surplus, 3 times the amount of magnesium, and a massive surplus of sodium, which isn't even a nutrient, but it's antagonistic to the other major cations, and it will prevent the uptake of those nutrients in that condition. Also, phosphorus was so freaking low. It was literally a 0.4 ppm. It was so low, right? So there's not enough phosphorus in that soil to offer the energy. The energy uses a chemical called adenine triphosphate. This is the energy exchange currency
of life, right? Same with us.
Of everything, all biology, cellular biology. It requires this chemical, and that's why phosphorus is so important in soils, is because that chemical is made out of three phosphate molecules, that chemical. So That being said, in that conditions, you wouldn't have enough energy for the plants to, you know, do anything, metabolize things or uptake things. You just simply don't have the energy reserves. And in which case, something like mycorrhizal fungi that can help solubilize phosphate from mineralized phosphorus.
Right.
Right. In that condition, it would be advantageous to add something like a mycorrhizal fungus, because in that situation, the plant is going to release a photosynthate or an exudate to signal that it needs the type of relationship to be able to survive in that type of soil.
But that's a big distinction.
Yeah, it is a huge distinction. And that's why I know a lot about both sides as far as modified growing mixes and then the standard agronomic soils. And there's a huge disconnect when it comes to science that's being conducted on an agronomic soil and science that's being conducted in a modified growing mix.
And in lay terms, us home growers growing cannabis in a pot of pre-designed soil, the rules don't apply to us necessarily the same way as trying to build that soil food web out, as you said, out in the field. So we need to be approaching it from a totally different angle, which makes sense to me. But again, are we losing anything? For instance, with the trichoderma, do you get everything that you would want out of a microbe, a beneficial fungi? Or like, I guess what I'm saying, is it just a cost thing, or do you think that it is truly a better source of soil biology in this case?
Well, here's an interesting thing, right? The agronomic soil that we have our plants in is native soil. Here in Oklahoma, we have what's called red dirt, and it's because it's very high in iron.
Oh, damn.
I wouldn't need trichoderma because that's that and magnesium were the one things that were sufficient on the test. And so adding trichoderma as a pathogen suppression could be considered.
Sure.
But what I'm mainly using it for in these modified growing systems is because of the secondary metabolites that it produces have the ability to chelate iron and to convert oxidized iron into its reduced form, which is the only biologically form of iron that's available.
Interesting. So again, it does seem pretty specific then. So you're using trichoderma for other reasons. And okay, that makes sense.
And then here's the thing, right? You mentioned trichoderma and bokashi. What you meant, I think, to say was the trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis, because that is a consortium that I use together. One is a fungus, one is a bacteria. They work synergistically together. One will actually travel along the filaments and the fungal hyphae that the other produces, and they work very, very well together. And that's why I use that combination, both for pathogen suppression, but because also when you're inoculating a soil with that, especially in a modified growing mix, where what happens is because these modified mixes are so highly porous, they have a lot of oxygen. What happens to iron is it's oxidized into an unavailable form so quick because we're growing our cannabis in a pH range to where it makes that happen really fast. So most of the iron that is in the soil is not going to fall into solution in an adequate amount. So being able to use things like biology from the sidiophores, from the trichoderma, that can naturally chelate, because they have the highest iron affinity in any natural biological system, is these chemical compounds that the trichoderma produce.
Wow.
That being said, if we can have a bacteria that can take iron that's been oxidized and reduce it into its biological form, then we're going to find better sufficiency in that system, because iron is a photosynthetic chemical that's responsible for the production of chlorophyll and quite a lot of other chemicals that are needed for the plant's metabolism.
Right, that iron deficiency. I mean, I do see it. I'm not the greatest at diagnosing deficiencies, but up in our Discord with, the great Mary Beth Sanchez, and you do see the iron deficiency coming out. Very interesting. Give me that combination again, what you apply with the trichoderma?
Bacillus subtilis.
See, I by the way, I was saying bokashi earlier and I didn't mean in combination with the trichoderma, but you do use bokashi, right? And most growers I know don't use bokashi.
Okay, so bokashi is really good because that carrier, it's carrying the consortium of the several different species of bacillus, the Rhizops, Pseudomonas, and the Saccharomyces.
Oh, okay. So you do have a pretty, well, I don't know. I don't mean to call you on contradicting yourself, but you seems like you do have a pretty diverse system. I mean, not super diverse, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. No. I do. I have. So I'm using a probiotic stimulant. Right? Is what the Micro Plus or the EM consortium. That's what it is. They work synergistically to help cycle nutrients, particularly that consortium really helps solubilize phosphate. It also helps increase manganese solubility, and it has the pathogen suppression aspect as well. But I wanted to get back to, these modified systems
Sure.
versus these agronomic systems, which are typically what they're talking about when you hear about soil food web, right? And so they're trying to apply soil food web science to build soil into a perfectly structured, balanced system, which is the modified growing mix. I mean, if you're getting something from like myself, Kiss Organics, Build a Soil, those people have agronomic data and they've balanced their soils out. So that way you're going to have really good results with pretty minimal inputs.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect because, to get there, that's what I'm working on, and I haven't achieved unlocking the genetic potential of a plant yet. I've come pretty close, but I've never done it. And you could look at, something in my garden and be like, dude, that's flawless. But I know that there's hidden hungers that you can't see because just because something doesn't show up as a deficiency, it's because it's never brought to that point. But I know I could still have more copper or more iron because I'm looking at the tissue and I'm looking at the sap to see what's actually available to the plant to use. And I know that even if it's sufficient when it falls into solution, I can go ahead and add those because I have data points that suggest that I can increase those. So
that is fucking cool, man. That's like functional medicine versus traditional medicine. Like one of the arguments for functional doctors when it comes to medicine, for humans is if you take a blood test and you're within the range of a pathology, you're already way too far off to where you need the testing to get it in an optimal range. You can't just go by how you're feeling. So you're saying that you can see a plant and it's showing no signs of a pathology, no signs of a sickness or a symptom, but a tissue analysis will tell you could have done better with X. Am I following?
Yeah. So what it does is it allows you to address problems before they become visual symptoms.
Oh, sure.
And so you know that you have mobile nutrients. Okay.
That makes sense.
I really want to get back to that. Before I get into this,
go
let's
ahead.
go back to the
mycorrhizal
conversation.
Sure.
Now, in these modified systems where they're adequately balanced, you're going to have enough phosphate in solution that the plant is going to not need to expend energy to try to keep an association with another organism continually going, right? Because that's what the plant is doing. It's getting energy from the sun in these agronomic conditions, and then it's releasing some of that energy as a photosynthate chemical that is going to be probably a complex carbohydrate that it is exchanging for the nutrition that it needs, right? It's giving away something to get something. That doesn't mean that just because it got it, the thing is you want energy conservation. You don't want to have that plant release anything into the soil because it's trying to like change a pH, to make something more available, or to, create a reductase compound to try to solubilize something that it needs, because it takes energy to do that. And so in these agronomic settings, those types of chemical mechanisms and are going back and forth continuously, especially if you're, deficient in nutrient.
Okay.
So for me, I would rather do what works best for the modified living system with the modified growing mix, which is the trichoderma, because iron can always be more available, it seems, right? It's just contingent, right? It's contingent on the data points, on what's happening, the whole thing with mycorrhiza, it's going to help assist with mineral nutrient uptake. But mostly what it's doing is it's creating a secondary metabolite that's going to solubilize phosphorus.
Right.
But here's the thing. So there's a lot of new data coming out, and I spoke to someone the other day that was doing the testing even after inoculations had been done, and they can test roots to see if that association with the mycorrhizal has been made, and it's rarely the case.
Interesting.
It's really rarely the case in these systems, and so when it comes to large scale cultivation and the costs for input, it doesn't make sense, because if you're adding something that you're just hoping might work, and it like, oh, maybe if you're someone who isn't sure about their soil nutrition or their soil balance, and they don't have any way to test, and they're using it in there because they're like, they don't know, like, hey, it could help, it could be beneficial if I am completely deficient in phosphorus, that's there, or it's going to go through. It's contingent. And for me, the benefit from the trichoderma, bacillus, things like the microbe plus that have, a target, like, why am I doing this? This is exactly what I want. And then I can go and look at and see if I've achieved that goal by looking at the data. Right.
Interesting, man. Yeah, I do know exactly what you're saying, because to be honest, most people who listen to the show are home growers, and most home growers are kind of shooting in the dark with a lot of this stuff. They buy soil, you know what I mean? They hope it gets them through the whole run. A lot of the times they're lured in by the water only claim, which rarely seems to be the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to make just a straight water only soil, because what happens when you can do, let's say, but you can't do a water only soil in a 3-gallon pot with a 5-foot plant.
Right.
Right. It's contingent on the circumstance.
Yeah.
Like so many things.
True. And cannabis is a hungry plant, man. Like you said, we try to fulfill this plant's needs with just a bag of dirt. You know what I mean? It's not even really dirt, as you said, but a bag of growing media. And a lot of the time, as you said, we put it in a 3-gallon, even a 5-gallon pot. And depending on what cultivar you have, god dang, it'll gobble up a lot of the, not to mention if you're overwatering and some of the nutrients are running off. All that aside, the plant's just going to eat and eat and eat.
Yeah. And I think, so most home growers who are, struggling and are like having deficiencies, a lot of the times it's not even that they don't have a sufficient amount. It's just that it's out of balance, or they've done something where they've over applied sodium. And so it makes it so you can't get the other things that you need.
What do you recommend in that case? Like in the second case, it sounds pretty easy, right? Would you recommend using a product like an SLF 100 to break down that sodium, or you tell me?
So what I do in a system like that, I rarely ever flush a system. I don't even water the runoff. But if I see on, let's say, a consultant's soil that they have extremely high sodium, chloride, or bicarbonate to the point where I know it's going to be antagonistic, what I'll do is I'll look at their calcium percentage to see, I'll look at their ppms of calcium. And what I'll do is I'll have them add the amount of calcium that they would need to get that into a sufficient range, but I'll have them flush the bed. Right. And then what I have them do is I have them take another test after they flush the bed so that you can re-gauge where the level's at. Because one of the things about sodium is that it does move through solution pretty well if it's not stuck to something. And what happens is the calcium, if you overload it, it's going to push those sodium ions off of any type of material that they're attached to, bonded to. Whoa. And that's going to rinse out in solution.
That is fascinating. I've seen a couple of nutrient lines that have like a calcium flushing product.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's probably the same exact thinking.
Yeah. So calcium is a macronutrient for cannabis.
Right.
It is actually it should be the highest
consumed. Yeah, I think you told us this on the last episode.
Yeah, and then actually potassium, then nitrogen. It depends on, of course, it depends on growth stage too. I run lower potassium in veg, but it can be real high. Potassium is kind of cool because typically I see it's too low, but it's almost like you can go too high, but it's a little harder to overdo because the plant will just utilize so much potassium throughout the cycle.
Right. That makes sense.
It's the second used nutrient,
You mentioned something, and I don't know, again, if you want to go somewhere else, but this feels like a pretty good transition into a recent Instagram post you had about purple stems. We'll be right back with Brandon Rust, but before that, an old partner here, Da Vinci Vaporizers, everybody. Go to growcastpodcast.com/vape right now and check out Da Vinci IQ2 Vaporizer. Brand new dual-use urban oil, extremely sleek design, intelligent design. Da Vinci Vaporizers are back with the IQ2. If you go to growcastpodcast.com/vape, that way they know that we sent you. Go ahead and send me a receipt to be entered to win free seeds. I trust that you used our link, growcastpodcast.com/vape, as I said. And you can check out the IQ2 Intelligent Vaporizer. Precision temperature control, as I said, for flower and concentrate as well. Clean First trademark technology keeps it nice and clean and effective. You got to check it out. Da Vinci IQ2 Vaporizer. It's really nice on the lungs. Also, like I said, it's portable, it's sleek, it's stylish. Really, really great option for the vaporizer fans out there. growcastpodcast.com/vape. Pick yourself up a Da Vinci IQ2. All right, everybody, let's get back to it with Brandon Rust. This feels like a pretty good transition into a recent Instagram post you had about purple stems. A lot of people say that purple stems are a sign of a potassium issue, but you said it went deeper than just that.
No, it doesn't just have to do with potassium. It has to do with cation imbalance, and then it also has to do with nutritional sufficiency. So typically, and here's the thing, it was a really, really hot topic because a lot of cannabis growers don't take data like I do. And so they want to really defend what they think they know.
Sure. It's a human instinct.
And so I've gotten a lot of,
backlash. It's a shame, man. I don't know why people feel the need to do that. You can just keep scrolling. I'm always interested to ask because I was always of the mind that, I know it can be a sign of a stressor, but I was always also told that it could just be genetic. I want to hear from you if it's even, a possibility that it's a genetic, or you're just saying 90% of the time it's this cationic exchange issue.
The whole thing is that why people got so upset is because they don't pay attention. Because if you listen to the things that I say, I'm usually saying something very specific.
Right.
And sometimes they miss that specificity. Is that a word?
Specificity. We'll go with that one. Dude, I know exactly what you're saying. They might get a little triggered by the topic and you go, no, that's not even what I was saying. Yeah. But please continue.
So there are things that cause this in plants. And yes, high UV or high intensity light can be a factor, but usually it's because what's happening in the plant is that it doesn't have enough photosynthetic chemical to keep up with the rate of
growth,
metabolic rate of the plant, right?
Wow.
So the plant is receiving all this light. It's trying to convert this light into energy through photosynthesis, but if it's limited in the amount of photosynthetic nutrient, which is nitrogen, magnesium, iron, sulfur, and I believe molybdenum, if you don't have enough of that, what ends up happening is the plant starts to show a sign of stress. And one of those stress responses, I believe, is Anthocyanin Production, because that's used kind of like a sunblock. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to protect itself from that high intensity light because it doesn't have the nutritional sufficiency to be able to handle that intensity.
Wow. That is fascinating.
That is what I'm seeing. That is like hands down what I'm seeing when it comes to the data that I'm collecting, what I'm looking at, the anecdotal evidence. It matches up, and that's why I'm making the claim. I'm not making the claim just so I can talk out of my ass, you know what I mean?
No, you're sharing your findings, man. And I thought it was cool because you said, watch me correct this. You'll see these purple stems go away as it begins to correct. But that's also interesting because you're right. It's pointing to a sign of insufficient nutrition. But that anthocyanin production, obviously not what we're looking for in veg. We're looking for optimal nutrition to get the veg cycle underway, to get to
But
flower
people
center, all that
want to
stuff.
argue that it's that the whole thing was I'm talking about, maximizing the genetic potential, and if the
Yeah.
plant has a stress response where it has to use energy to create a chemical
Yeah.
compound to try to protect itself. I don't feel like that's maximizing genetic potential. And so people are like, hey, no, it's genetic. Well, if it is common for cannabis as a species to be able to produce this chemical component, it's genetic across the board. It's not just like, oh no, that's genetics. Like, this is definitely genetics. It's always going to be that way when it's met all of its nutritional needs and when it's
Right.
balanced. If I see something where I know hands down, like, dude, I can't do any better. Like, this meets all the requirements, and it's still doing that same thing, then I'll say, okay, but in my experience, that hasn't been the case, and I've grown thousands and thousands and thousands of plants.
That's
People
pretty
don't
crazy,
understand
man.
the tens of thousands of plants that I have grown in my career.
Would you say you're a perfectionist? A bit of a perfectionist?
You can't be perfect because there's always something that you can go further. And this is the thing that I was talking about, right?
I was saying that in an endearing way. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but it sounds like you never feel satisfied. You're always looking to do it a little bit better, and I think that's a good thing. It was endearing, to be clear.
Yeah, well, you can't. Satisfaction and complacency are, to me, kind of the same. You can be satisfied, but you don't want to let that just become, oh, I'm good now. Like, if
Yep.
you want to strive to be the best, if you want to strive to keep learning, if you want to strive to help keeping people to be able to do the same thing and to be able to learn, then I can't be complacent and just satisfied with it at the end of the day. I want to see what I can do next.
100%, man. 100%. I like that. But it's interesting, like you said, the stressors creating that anthocyanin response, getting those purple stems. But interesting. It's about a cationic imbalance in the soil, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so typically the first thing it is, if it's not UV, because people are pushing these plants super, super hard without really understanding the balance that's needed. And like, if you ask a grower, what are the 5 photosynthetic nutrients? How many out of 100 are going to be able to give you a correct answer?
Not me.
And I'm just saying, it's like being able to just really understand the mechanics of how these things are being utilized, how they're uptaking, how much they need. It's different. It's really like, I was guessing my whole entire career until I started taking data. I'm not taking anything away because I still grew dank ass weed, and there's tons of people. Most home growers are growing better weed than commercial facilities.
I like this, dude. I like this take.
I'm not taking that away. I'm saying, in my experience, I can really, really understand things with the science.
100%, man. We're all on our own cultivation journey. I think it's comparison that triggers people. I don't think that looking at someone's garden or hearing them speak should have any effect on you other than, take what they have to say and agree with it and implement it, or don't. But yeah, I'm definitely one of those growers, man. I mean, you just listed those nutrients and I couldn't name them. But wait, I want to dig into something there because you said about the UV. I mean, does anyone really understand? Because you're saying, we're trying to understand through data, which is our best effort. But does anyone really understand aspects of growing, such as UV? That's like a hotly contested topic. I talk to lighting experts, and they kind of go either way.
There's science out there, It's not. You have to remember that when it comes to agriculture, it's one of the biggest things next to pharmaceuticals in the world. And so trillions and trillions of dollars have been spent on research. Okay. You just need to be able to find the research and see if it's applicable.
Right.
And that's what I do, right? If I find some research paper and I'm like, dude, something clicks, and I was like, this makes sense, I'm going to see if it has a practical application in reality, because science is great, but if you get a science paper and you can't repeat it or it doesn't work in the system and the conditions that you're operating in, it
Right.
doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It's useless.
Well, then where do you fall on if you've done some if you've combed over some of that research? Do you supplement UVB or any of these special spectrums?
So I started using full spectrum, I think of the 41K ceramic metal halide lights back in 2014. And when I got out here to Oklahoma, I did my first LED, the spot that they were already laced up with LEDs. And so they're using full spectrum. I'm not sure how intense the UV is, but I know that there are different photosystems in the plant that utilize different spectrums of light for different processes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's science out there. And I'm not a lighting expert, and that's not one of the things that I focus a lot of my expertise on.
Okay, right.
That right there is a topic for Dr. MJ Coco.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole, man. He seems to be pretty deep in that. And like I said, I'm not sure we fully understand all of those processes, as you said. And it's fascinating to see these guys much smarter than me. And actually, you know, a lot of the time, these like academic guys stepping into this, Dr. Bruce Bugbee and all these guys, you know?
Well, you know, 40, 50 years of indoor cultivation isn't going to change billion years of natural evolution.
Yeah, that's true.
Sun.
That's true.
So, you know, that being said, we have the sun, plus we use double-ended HPS in our mixed light greenhouses because that's what we could afford. We would have gone with high-intensity LEDs.
Sure.
But it's supplemental lighting, and we are most of the time using the sun. So we have that full spectrum, plus we have the modified growing mix. You know, you wanted to talk a little bit about the amino acid biohack.
I was just going to bring this up. It's funny you said I was just looking at this point. You made another post recently about amino acids and someone talking about burning on their plants, and you were talking about how amino acids don't cause burning. Just dig into that for us here. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. So the amino acids, I use soy hydrolysate. What's interesting about it is because it's an acid, an organic acid that has a molecule of nitrate, but it's absorbed immediately as an amino acid, not a nitrate. So it's already complex. What happens in plant physiology is that the plant has to convert the nitrogen into amino acids and then proteins, and that can take metabolic energy.
Right.
And it can take up to 15% of the plant's energy to convert the nitrogen into proteins. But the interesting thing is L-chain amino acids are biologically available in the root zone, and they can be taken up as those complex, like already complex nitrogen. So the plant doesn't have to utilize that extra energy to convert that because it's already there. So it has all the amino acids available, and then all that's happening is those are being constructed into proteins. And proteins, as you know, are things like the lignin and the cellulose. You're talking about a system that saves you energy to build the structure that the plant is made out of.
Right. So this is something you brought up on, I think, the last time you were on. You're basically circumventing that whole process of changing it into the amino acids in the first place by applying them as amino acids. What I didn't know is, why doesn't it burn? It's not capable of burning the plant because you're not adding nutrition to make the soil imbalanced? Like, why is that?
So what you won't see is like the nitrogen burn where you see like the really bad leaf curl and you see the necrotic edges that all burn up really bad. That doesn't happen because it's not the nitrogen. It's not the nitrogen. It's an already complex amino acid.
Wow.
And amino acids are just stored in the tissue. And they offer, they also, one of the things about this is they also offer energy as the amino acids are broken down. So if they have that stored in the tissue and it gets utilized for whatever, it releases adenine triphosphate.
Oh, okay. Wow.
As well. So that's one of the benefits of the amino acids. It's a really good question because I can't give you a full, detailed understanding of why it doesn't burn, but my basic understanding is because it's an already complex amino acid protein.
Nitrogen doesn't cause nitrogen burn because it's not nitrogen.
Yeah. Exactly. It has nitrogen in it, And like it says, if you look at the bag, it says a water soluble nitrogen. It's crazy because this is something that kind of drives me a little nutty. Is I can add the soy hydrolysate into a system and it won't come up on testing, right? It does not come up as nutrient.
Whoa.
And so being able to try to gauge exactly what you need, it's taken me a little bit because it only shows up as complex total nitrogen as amino acids and proteins in the leaf in the sap and leaf tissue.
Wow.
So that's the only way I can gauge application rates for amino acids because it doesn't even not only does it not burn plants, but it doesn't even show up as nutrition as far as nitrogen.
Wow.
On the data. So
that is fascinating. So that makes it, like you said, that makes it hard to dial in. But as long as it's getting enough, if you can't burn anything, can it throw anything out of imbalance? Seems like
so what it can do is I typically like to get my nitrogen levels really high in veg, and my plants are really big right before I flip them. And so I'll get them up to, 5.5% total nitrogen percentage in tissue. And that will be typically sufficient enough as a reserve that it has in there to get through a whole run.
Oh, okay. Right.
So what I'm looking at also a lot of times is the percentage that we have in tissue. And then if it's a mobile nutrient, I'm looking at the sap to see if it's pulling anything from the lowers, because that's how nutrient deficiencies start. And if I can see them right at the beginning and give it to them, they'll never even come. Your deficiencies don't show until you're probably about 50% deficient where you should be.
Wow.
But if it's 3 or 5% deficient and I see that it's starting to pull phosphorus from the lower part of the plant, I know that even if it's sufficient on saturated paste and soil testing, I need to add more phosphorus. I need to add some calcium phosphate, or I need to increase something like my biologicals that can help cycle that nutrient.
Jeez. We're coming up against the time limit here shortly, but I got to ask this. This soil testing, if you don't have, what, are you getting this done by a lab? I imagine it can get expensive if you're doing it regularly, or do you do this yourself?
No, I send the data to a lab, Logan Labs, right? I get a standard soil and saturated paste test. It's not expensive. It's about $60.
Oh, really?
It can get expensive if you have a huge facility and you're testing every single bed, but that's not how I operate, because I will explain, but it has to be a visual explanation so I can go and so everybody can see that.
Yeah, we'll do this on video. We'll break down a whole soil test and how he goes through correcting it. That'll be really fun, man. I appreciate you offering to do that off air. He had offered to do that, so I appreciate you, man. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I can at least show the target levels. I can't show you how to get there. That is going to be for the audience and people who want to grow. That is where they have to connect the dot to become a better grower, because that is the part that I'm not going to do for you, and I'll tell you why. Because that is the part that can be both the most difficult, but it's also the thing that is going to set you apart in the understanding and the complexities of how the soil is interacting with the plant.
So just quickly, how often do you get that test? Like, how often could you get away with getting that test?
So I personally test about bi-weekly. Oh. So I'll send something out, let's say on a Friday. Next Friday, I'll have results. Over the weekend, I'll amend if I need amendments. And then the following Monday, I'll send out another test.
Oh, shit. Wow.
And I'll repeat that process over and over and over. And then what I do is throughout the cycle, I'll take a couple of tissue tests and a couple of sap tests.
Crazy,
sap
man.
is the real winner. And I'll tell you why sap is so extraordinary in my point. So some of your viewers probably already follow me on Instagram at russ.brandon and have seen, the gardens, and they look magnificent. They always do. I can look at something and be like, that is fucking gorgeous.
They appear
and
to.
most people would be like, I'm cool. If my plants look like that, I'm satisfied.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the thing is, when I'm taking data and I can see things like micronutrients could be increased or phosphorus could still go up,
Right.
I can know that I haven't reached that maximum potential because I haven't pushed all the little things that the data is giving me. But I have a way to do that, which is going to be, because some of these things are tricky, man, because soil chemistry changes constantly with hydrology fluctuations, moisture fluctuations, and with temperature fluctuations. It is constantly in a state of flux. And so one of the things that I found is amino chelated micronutrients, an organic solution to keep a micronutrient or any nutrient in a biologically available form and be able to apply it as a foiler. So that way you bypass all of the chemistry that's happening in the soil and you give it directly to the plant as you see it on the sap. So if I see that iron and copper are low, I can go and do a foiler application, wait a couple of days or a week, take another leaf tissue sap sample and to get the data back and say, this is exactly what I needed. I needed to add X amount of this amino chelated copper to get this to the sufficient level where it's going to bang out. So what I found out is that soil has to be balanced and sufficient, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Like it doesn't need to be this at this point perfect every single time. That's actually not possible. But you can give the plant exactly what it needs if you have the data to do so and just give it, it just needs a little bit more manganese this time. Do a foiler with the amino chelated manganese and then watch what happens and see the difference, dude. It's about being able to truly understand and reach those genetic potentials. That's what I'm working on right now, dude. I'm like, got the data. I just bought some new products. It's organic, CDFA certified, called Biomin. And I'll eventually make the stuff myself. But I'm doing some research with it because I'm going down this rabbit hole about copper and iron right now.
Whoa, just specific micronutrient applications. This sounds like some pretty heady shit, man. Very interesting. Right before we wrap it up, because right on this note, what about cultivar to cultivar? Like it seems like, okay, let's say you're dialing in your soil perfectly. Do you see differences in cultivars and how they feed on the paper?
Yep, absolutely, dude.
Wow.
It's night and day difference, and that's one of the reasons that brought me up to the red stems, because I have a cultivar that has a very interesting nutrient requirement, and if that nutrient requirement isn't met, it will show those symptoms even though it appears to be healthy.
Wow.
Right? And that's the thing. It's just because something appears to be a certain way doesn't mean it necessarily is.
So
and
true.
that's, again, why the data is so important to me.
Wow, man. Okay, that's a good mic drop moment. Let's see. Your Instagram, of course, bokashiearthworks.com. Throw out your Instagram one more time.
Yeah, so Bokashi Earthworks, all one word. That's also the website, and then rust.brandon on IG. You can find the body of my work. Links to both Bokashi Earthworks and the farm that I co-own and co-founded, Black Label Organics.
Nice. Go give them a follow, everybody. Definitely an Instagram account you want to be following for sure. Brandon, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Always looking forward to your posts. Thank you, man.
Thanks, man. Have a good night.
Yeah, take care. And listeners, you take care out there. Jordan River and Brandon Russ signing off saying be safe and grow smarter. That's our show, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Brandon Rust. Another enlightening episode as usual. Before we wrap it up, though, want to give some love to Purity Coffee. A lot of people have been asking me about Purity Coffee and getting their hands on some. PurityCoffee.com. You can use code RIVER. That's my code. You can save 20% on the world's best coffee, in my humble opinion, formulated for health. Code RIVER, 20% off and free shipping at PurityCoffee.com. Step up your game, man. It's like going from the dispo to the homegrown. You'll never go back. All right, that's all for now. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.